All right. Here we go, page 2 of the purchase agreement. Let's start out with seller concessions. This is in a very prominent spot now, so it's hard for anybody to be able to miss it, but simply what it says is seller hereby agrees to contribute blank dollars or blank percent towards buyer's prepaid tax prorations, closing costs, or any other allowable expense. So where do I get that number from? The lender. So talk with the lender in regards to how much do they need it? If so, how much do I put in there? And this could be a dollar amount because the lender may have calculated out what they do actually need. Now, from there we move to the earnest money deposit. Earnest money deposit is really what it says. If you look at earnest, it's saying this is my money that I'm willing to put out, that I am earnest in moving forward with the terms of this purchase agreement. I am going to close this under the terms of the purchase agreement. This is my good faith in making this offer to you. So what it says is the buyer is depositing with the broker, that is us, blank dollars in the form of a check, money order, cashier's check, certified funds, or wired directly to the broker. All of those are options. Now, from there, here's an option. An additional sum of blank dollars can be tendered within blank calendar days of acceptance by the sellers, making the total earnest money deposit blank dollars. So let me give a scenario. I may work with a buyer who says, look, I'll give them $2,000 now, and I'll give them $3,000 later. And I say, yeah, within 5 days, right? They say, yup. Then we'd have a total earnest money deposit of the 2 and the 3 together. It's $5,000. So it would put buyers depositing with the broker $2,000, form of check, money order, cashier's check, certified funds wired directly to the broker, and an additional sum of $3,000 will be tendered within 5 days, calendar days of acceptance of the buyers by the seller, making the total earnest money deposit $5,000. So now, there's more that you can do with that. I'm going to leave that to your broker manager to be able to describe how you might use this so that you don't have to collect the earnest money deposit directly up front. So make that note for when you sit down with your broker manager. Ask, why would I not collect anything up front? Okay? From there, it simply says that the total sums deposited will be deemed the earnest money deposit, and it's to be held in accordance with the laws of the state of Michigan applied to the purchase price at closing. So let's address that really quickly. What do we know about earnest money deposit? When must we give it to the broker? Once we receive it, when must we give it to the broker? Even if it says 5 days later, if we get it within the 5 days, when must we do it? Immediately. As real estate agents, we have to provide it to the broker immediately. Okay? Now that's both company policy, but it's a state law also. So as soon as you as a real estate agent receive earnest money deposit, it must be given to the broker ASAP. All right? Now, from there, it's this. It must be deposited by the broker within 2 days of receiving it. So that's where your 2 days. The broker has 48 hours to be able to get that into the bank. Now, from there, the earnest money deposit shall be dispersed only in accordance with either the terms hereof, a fully executed mutual release, or until a civil action has determined to whom it's actually to be paid. So as brokers, here's what I can tell you. We cannot hold someone's earnest money deposit, but we cannot release it if there is a known dispute. And thus, the reason that we need a mutual release. Okay? Now, you need more on that, and typically discussions are going to come up. You're going to need more on that, and that's when you'll sit down and review that with your broker manager. Paragraph number 7, we take a look at. Let me come back, guys. Sorry. Paragraph number 7 is where we're saying, let's acknowledge that we've received it. Now, we're only going to put our name and sign it if we've actually received it at the time of the offer. If we had 0, but we'll get 5,000 later, we haven't received it when we made the offer, and that's where we'll leave this blank. Okay? If we have it, then we do sign it, because again, this is an acknowledgement that we have received the earnest money deposit. Closing. This is a simple one, but I want you to highlight. Closing shall take place on or before. On or before. So it could close earlier. It could close earlier. It also says that the closing will be at the listing office or otherwise mutually agreed upon location. So the listing broker really does control it in most, if not all, of our areas. However, it is a mutually agreed upon location. Buyers shall not be deemed to default to this agreement for any delay beyond the agreed upon closing date due to reasons associated with truth in lending and or federal disclosure requirements related to the buyer's good faith estimate. And the closing date shall be extended for the period necessary to satisfy these requirements. So here's what I'm pointing out to you now. Just because a transaction doesn't close by the date on the purchase agreement does not void the contract. It's not automatic. It is not a hard date. Now, they don't have long, but this specifies what can be extended. But above all else, don't let another agent tell you that, well, if you don't close by, we're not closing. That's where we've got to get a little bit stern and make sure that we refer back to paragraph 8. Paragraph 9, closing costs. When the sale is either lender financed, let me rephrase that. When the sale is lender financed, the closing fee charged by the closing agent shall be paid in full by the buyer. Now, this is it's a closing fee. It's the money that the title company typically charges to actually close the transaction and handle that. All right? Let's see. So with that, it's paid by the buyer in full. But we do have the situation where it's cash or seller financed. Now we're going to agree upon who's actually going to handle that charge. We can say it's on the seller, we can say it's on the buyer, it could be split 50-50, and then of course the obvious is, if this is mortgage finance, then it's not applicable. And all we would do is simply check the correct or appropriate box. Possession, this is a key part. You'll need to remember that we are addressing very fully how possession is to be handled along with the time of day where it's to be given up. So, sellers shall deliver possession to buyers, either check at closing or by 11:59 a.m. So we're talking noon. But it is 11:59 a.m. and I will tell you that it's a.m. 11:59 because if we put 12 o'clock p.m., people might think that's midnight. So there is a definite clarification and reason for 11:59 a.m. and that would be blank days. Now, for this one, know that it's typical with financing. A lender wants no longer than 60 days. They want the buyer who they're giving this money to occupy the property within 60 days of taking possession. So that's where we would have, look, it could be 0 days, just to emphasize the point of at closing. 1, 2, it can be anywhere typically between 1 and 60. If you're going beyond 60 days, I'm going to say talk with your broker manager as to your situation, identify what's going on, and figure out whether or not there may be a better way to be able to handle any post-closing occupancy. From there, it says if possession is not delivered at closing, and here's where it's defining it now, it's from and including the day of closing through the date of vacating. So by 11:59, let's say we had 30 days in there, by 11:59 a.m., 30 days later, seller shall pay the sum of blank dollars per day. Now, there's a couple of things that we can do with this, and I want you again to work with your broker manager on this. What's the situation? Depending upon the situation, there is a negotiating strategy. What is the best way to be able to help the buyer buy this home at the lowest possible price, but it's buy the home? That's what we've got to work with them on. So, if we're going to put amount in there, we could put 1/30 of the principal, interest, taxes, insurance. My only reason for not liking that one is things change. And it's not something that I can count on a particular amount. So due to the potential change in interest rates, what if some stupid reason they go from 30 years to 15 years? These are the type of things that can change what the PITI is. So I have a preference to get a hard number in there. I like fair market rent. If I've got a home that would rent for $1,800, divide that by 30, that's $60 a day. That would be a reasonable post-closing occupancy, okay? And again, we don't want to call it rent. We don't want to allude to the homeowner becoming a landlord. That creates lots of other issues. This is post-closing occupancy. It then states that the designated agent, escrow agent, shall retain from the amount due the seller at the time of closing a sum of 1.5 times the daily fee. There's a reason for this. It's a great incentive for the seller, 1, to get out of the house. 2, it's a great reason for both the buyer and the seller to sign a key exchange and release of those funds, because the seller's got money that they're going to get, and the buyer's got money that they're going to get. So that is the reason for the 1.5 times. It becomes a very nice incentive for all parties to make sure that they're in agreement to sign that key release. Now, from there, where we at? Designated agent shall disperse the occupancy fee to the buyer every 30 days, if that's where it's at, upon written request from the buyers. So the buyer, if they had a 60-day possession, they could request after 30 days, the first 30 days. Sellers shall be entitled to any unused portion of the occupancy fee as determined by the property, by the date the property is vacated, and the key surrendered to the buyer, the listing broker, or the selling broker. Now, again, this is in your discussion with your managing broker. You want to have that discussion. What would they do? My guidance is always to the buyer. That way, if I need to be involved, at least I have the option. If it's to the selling broker in this case, I have to be involved. I can always be involved. I just don't want to be necessarily required to be involved. So, again, check with your managing broker, get their thoughts and direction toward that. Now, here's a key part, and this I almost like to see a break here, but it's still part of the possession. Seller is legally obligated to deliver the possession as specified herein. And then it's almost like it should have a big however. If the seller fails to deliver possession as specified, seller shall pay blank dollars per day. Now, this is a make it hurt amount. And my guidance would be this: if they had to stay at a hotel, how much would it cost them? It better be at least that amount. So that's a minimum. And yeah, I believe the more expensive the house, probably the more you should be charging per day. I'm telling you, I think regardless of the home, that's $200. Regardless of the home, it's at least $200. More expensive the house, more that should go up. Again, I want to make it hurt. Get out of my house. Because again, the day that they closed, that buyer owns that home. It's theirs. So get out of my house. That's a penalty fee, is really what that is. It goes on to say, and may be liable for the cost of eviction, attorney fees, damages, and other costs incurred by the buyer in obtaining possession and collecting any amount due. Brokers have no obligation, implied or otherwise, as to the condition of the premises or to see that the premises are vacated on that date specified. So it's a little bit of a cover for us that we don't have to worry about it too much, but the bottom line right here, make it hurt. Get them out of my house. All right. Protection plans. Home warranties. You might want to make the note of what these are normally called. It's just saying buyer and seller are aware that they do have these, and then it is a home protection plan is or is not to be provided. If it is to be provided, it will be paid by the buyer or the seller, and it's not to exceed. So what you want to do is to take a look. Again, you're trying to get an offer and a negotiating strategy that's going to get the buyer at the lowest possible price. Sewer and water. Seller agrees to pay for all sewer and water charges to the date of my guidance is closing. Here's the reason. Post-closing occupancy. Are you going to remember? Is your buyer or the seller going to remember to get that final read on the water and or sewer? If it's done at closing, I don't have to worry about it. All right? And if it's 30 days, even if it's 60 days, but and there are some high water sewer cost municipalities. But even then, is it worth missing or forgetting and somebody becoming even a larger amount? Now from there it says the designated agent shall retain from the amount due the seller at closing blank dollars. For the most part, I think you can just remember, make a note that it's $300. There are areas where you may put more. That could be $500, even $600. On the other hand, some of you are in areas where it's very low. $200 might be enough. But we wanted to give you the flexibility in being able to have that as we go through. Title evidence. So, seller agrees to order insurance upon acceptance of the offer and to furnish buyer a commitment of title insurance. It is a owner's policy versus a mortgage policy. So I just want to remind you that the seller is providing, by the purchase agreement, seller is providing an owner's policy to the purchaser. If a mortgage is involved, then the buyer is going to provide a mortgage policy of title insurance to the lender. Now, a couple of things to note in here. Right here. Buyer to secure and pay for a survey if required by the title company, remove the standard exception. After closing, a policy of title insurance and at seller's sole cost, without standards exceptions, will be issued in the amount of the purchase price, bearing the date of closing, or later guaranteeing title in condition required for performance of this agreement. I believe that's self-explanatory. Title commitment shall be marked up. Otherwise, it's saying that the title company will be responsible for covering the title, clear title, from the date of the recording, closing insuring through the date of recording. It's their incentive to make sure that they get the deed recorded, that nothing new comes onto it. Any objections? And guys, this is a simple one. Rarely do we have title objections. Is there anything on title that would hold back? It's really getting more to the point of if there is something on title that needs to be cleared. That's the common, but rarely does a buyer have any objection. But I can tell you, my 37 years at the time that we've recorded this, I've had things where, as a buyer, I would have objected. So know that the possibility is there. Let's drop down to our last one, that is taxes. All property taxes due and payable on or before the date of closing shall be paid by the seller. That makes it real clear. Now, there's a little here where I'm going to give the true clarification. I'm going to say you've got to break this up in regards to what it's referring to. Current taxes shall be prorated and adjusted as of the date of closing in accordance with the due date of the municipality or taxing unit in which the property is located. Current taxes shall be prorated and adjusted to the date of closing in accordance to the due date of the municipality. That's to when they will be prorated. How they are prorated is what we address next. Proration of taxes will be done as if paid in advance. So we even underlined it so that it's hard to miss it. All parties through our company will know we're treating them as paid in advance unless otherwise noted differently. So as you review this with your broker manager, you're going to want to find out any of the known locations where the municipality, where it may be even customary to treat taxes as if they are paid in arrears. But by the purchase agreement, they are treated as if paid in advance. All right? Sellers shall pay transfer taxes, other costs required to convey title. Buyers shall pay all costs for recording the warranty deed. So guys, that is page 2 of the purchase agreement. Let's take a brief break. We'll come back. We'll see you shortly.